Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Kris, I'm an Australian GP, and it's no secret that there's a lot of sicknesses out there right now. Lots of different viruses, lots of seasonal illnesses. It feels like it's probably the worst year we've had in a long time, and there's a lot to be said about that. I actually did a whole video on it last week. But the question I wanted to answer today is, when is sick enough to see a doctor? When do you actually need to get in touch with people like me, your general practitioner? And what can you be doing at home in the meantime, or at least until you see a doctor or to prevent seeing a doctor, for these really common colds and flus at the moment? Of course, if you're interested, keep watching, but don't forget to consider liking and subscribing. Especially with seasonal illnesses, the most common cause of what we're seeing at the moment are viruses. And viruses in themselves are usually what we know as self-limiting. That is, they go away by themselves. The truth of the matter is actually your body fights it and your immune system's awesome and kicks ass. However, just to put it very, very simply, you don't need anything special. There is no cough mixture or, lozenge that's going to get rid of anything sooner. There's really patchy evidence about the use of things like zinc and vitamin C. However, none of that's going to hurt you, and if it makes you feel better, by all means. But what is going to make you feel better? And when do you have to see a doctor? Well, let's talk about the symptoms that often come with having a seasonal virus and the common things that we can do even without a script to make us feel better. So one of the most common things is just being really congested, right? So really clogged up in the nose. You might feel pain in the sinuses, like you can't get a good breath. Because the sinuses are not just here, but also up here, up in here, and further back here, it may just feel like your whole face is just full and pounding. And that, when you lie down, everything blocks up and you can't breathe through your nose. It's actually a really uncomfortable feeling. So a lot of what you can do targets the maxillary sinuses right here. They can also release the tension and the pressure in other sinuses. Did you know that ear pain often is a sign of sinus pain as well? So let's focus on the sinuses here. Obviously, where I kept touching, the main communication is through the nose. So we're going to talk about nose sprays. One of the best things you can do is use salty water. Normal saline. You can use saline sprays, you can use nasal flushes. Flow and Fez are great brands, though obviously I'm not sponsored by anyone. But to do that, you can use like the actual kettles where you pour it up one end and flush it out. And this gets rid of any of the gunk, loosens it up and lets you breathe better. There are also nose sprays with normal saline in them, and the rule I have for nose sprays is X is no and Y is yes. So when you're putting it in your nose, obviously you got something in the middle there. That's your septum. You don't want to be spraying your septum. Your septum doesn't produce mucus. So what you're wanting to do, and this is really hard, I wish I had a nose spray with me, but essentially it's you're going up and back up a little bit. So you're aiming this way. So again, Y for yes. Y for yes, not crossing over, not going up and crossing, X for no. So using a saline spray or a, neti, what do they call them? Anyway, like the nasal flushes can be really, really helpful. The other thing is using a mild decongestant or a mild steroid spray. Common brands include Demister and Nasonex. However, again, you can use whatever brand. The main medication I use a lot in patients is mometasone, again, a mild steroid. And this reduces the inflammation and the amount of mucus your sinuses are producing. A word of caution, of course, with anything with medications in it, use it as directed. There is something known as sinusitis medicamentosa, I believe it's called, which is basically you use the medication so much, you actually get worse symptoms. So please follow the directions on the packet or given to you by your GP or pharmacist. But again, nose sprays can really help. Other than nose sprays, for sinus pressure and congestion, especially if it is congestion and not runny nose, oral decongestants can be really helpful. So common brands include Sudafed. Antihistamines can be useful if there is an allergic component, because the histamine reaction is more allergy than anything and doesn't really do much for decongesting. But again, it's not likely to harm you. Please note that some decongestants are also quite drowsying, so be wary of that. Also, pro tip, the color of snot tells us nothing. It's not yellow for viruses, green for bacteria, clear means nothing. It's all a lie. The colour of your snot is actually determined by how oxidized the epithelial cells of the nose are, basically how long they've been there. There are some, yeah, your snot will change colour, but again, green doesn't necessarily mean you need antibiotics. The next common thing we hear about when we've got a cold or a cough or a runny nose, the next common thing we hear about when we've got some sort of viral illness, sore throat. It's really hard because sometimes swallowing's really painful, it feels like razor blades, or it can feel really congested. And believe it or not, one of the best things with actual evidence behind it for sore throats is honey. So whether you have a teaspoon of honey, I said teaspoon, not tablespoon, or you have honey in warm drinks or something like that, it can be really soothing. Personally, when I've got a sore throat, cold things tend to numb it so I can tolerate things better. So frozen icy falls or even ice or icy water can be really, really great. Another thing that can really reduce how irritated the throat is a saltwater gargle. So again, with the salty water, we were putting it up our nose and now we're gargling it. It's really good stuff. And by the way, when I say salty water, you can make it at home with table salt and plain water, or you can buy it. There are many lozenges on the market which can help with sore throats. Two brands that spring to mind, Sudafed and Difflam. They have different ingredients. Some of them actually have a antiseptic in it, which may help. It's not really going to do much, but also have an anesthetic in them. So some sort of topical or local anesthetic to soothe the throat so you can then get medications down, food and drink. Another thing that helps with sore throat is actually warm things, soups. Soup and steam can also help decongest, help with the throat. Really, there is a reason we all crave chicken noodle soup or other types of soup when we're sick. And of course, sore throat is pain, so take a pain relief medication, like a simple paracetamol or ibuprofen, that is Panadol and Nurofen. Again, please follow the directions on the box or as prescribed by your practitioner. Next up, we've got a cough. God, coughs at the moment. Aren't they annoying? So many people who get sick have a lingering cough, and then you kind of feel like a social pariah when you go out, and you're like, no, trust me, I'm not sick now, I just was. Cough. A lot of coughs, especially dry, irritating coughs, are actually because of dripping from the nose and from the sinuses themselves. So see what I said before about that. Just like with the sore throat, honey is also excellent at soothing a cough. So again, we've already covered it. Dry air can really, really irritate the throat as well, which can trigger off a cough. So humidifiers can be really helpful in this instance, especially at nighttime when the air tends to be cooler and drier. When it comes to over-the-counter medications, so, cough medicines, there's not a lot of evidence that's going to do anything for you. Little evidence to say that it'll do you any harm too, which is good, but I wouldn't waste your money. If you do decide to use over-the-counter cough medicines, which is absolutely fine as long as it doesn't, worsen something by, interacting with the medication or whatever, just know a lot of them do have Panadol in it, so be careful if you are doubling up. Please also know if you have a history of asthma or other respiratory or airway diseases, a cough may be a sign that that's actually worsening, and we need to really address that instead. So if you've got asthma and your cough is worsening, you're waking up at night with a cough, you're not able to do what you would normally do before you got a cough, it may be a sign that we need to increase your preventer or start one if you weren't on one, and look at the use of your relievers. So again, a cough, usually benign, especially when it comes to a viral thing, usually goes away. However, would really recommend chatting to your doctor about that. So this is one of those rare times where you actually should see your GP with a cold if you have an underlying condition. The last thing that's really, really common when it comes to having a cold or a flu is the body aches and fatigue, like the absolute pain in the muscles and the joints and just being really restless and uncomfortable, but also fever. So I think we all know that Panadol and Nurofen, paracetamol and ibuprofen, can really help with all of this. So again, please follow the instructions and don't double up. So when should you see a doctor then, other than having a respiratory illness and a changing cough like I mentioned before? First and foremost, I should have prefaced this whole video with, this is about adults. If you have a child you're concerned about, we will never ever be upset if you want reassurance for your child. If they've got symptoms you're not happy with, if they seem sick, we are always happy to review them. When it comes to adults, of course, you know your body, and if you feel like something might be wrong, again, we'll be more than happy to look after you and look at you. Just know that we may not prescribe anything because whilst we completely appreciate that it feels really crummy to have these viruses, we know that in the long run, they're going to go away by themselves. But signs that you may need other interventions or other investigations include a persistent cough that's not going away, or a cough with an underlying respiratory illness, a fever that is not responding to any of the things I mentioned before, Panadol and Nurofen, If you're having trouble breathing, so for example, couldn't count to 10 out loud without stopping and taking a breath. If you're coughing so hard that you're vomiting, if you're not able to swallow and therefore you're not drinking or eating much at all, if you've got a history of being in hospital with a common cold or virus, then we should probably check on you. That being said, this is all very much vague advice because every illness has a different course and different symptoms and different things we can do. There are only 2 viral infections I can think of off the top of my head that have any medication, so antivirals, that would be helpful, and that's COVID and influenza. And even then, the evidence can be especially with influenza. So, long story short, there are lots of things you can do at home to help recover from a cold or a flu. If in doubt though, do chat to your GP. That's what we're here for. But if you just have a bit of a cold, bit of a snotty nose and feel a bit run down, you are able to try and manage it at home before you come and see us. But again, if in doubt, let us know. Hope you've learned something. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to let me know. Until next time though guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you in a video very soon. Bye.